говорил, если ты хотел.
Imagine standing at the mouth of a valley so hidden, so deliberately tucked away from the rest of the world, that even the mountains seem to lean inward. As if guarding a secret they have kept for 1,000 years. Where stone watchtowers built by ancient hands still rise from cliff tops, scanning horizons for enemies that stopped coming centuries ago. Where yak caravans move along trails so narrow and so steep that one wrong step sends loose pebbles spinning silently into valleys far, far below. Where monasteries carved directly into rock faces glow with butter lamp light at dawn, their golden light the first warmth in a world still wrapped in frozen darkness. This is not a place most maps bother to show you. This is Na Phu Valley, Nepal. A valley so remote, so fiercely protected by geography and government alike, that for most of its existence, the outside world simply did not know it was there. And for the people living inside it, that was never a problem. That was always the point. Here, Buddhism is not something practiced between other commitments. It is the operating system of existence itself. Every morning begins not with the buzz of a phone, but with the low, reverberating hum of monastery horns rolling down stone corridors. And spilling out across the valley floor like a slow tide of sound. Prayer wheels spin at every doorway. Mani walls carved with 10,000 sacred mantras line every trail. And prayer flags, faded by wind and altitude, frayed at the edges from years of mountain weather, stretch between ancient rooftops, releasing their whispered blessings into air so thin and cold and clear, it feels less like air and more like pure, distilled silence. The people who wake up inside this silence every morning do not consider themselves remarkable. They consider themselves home. If this kind of story speaks to something in you, subscribe. This channel exists for exactly this, for the places the world forgot to look, for the people the world forgot to see. Na Phu Valley sits deep within Nepal's Manang district, tucked into the far northeastern corner of the Annapurna region, just below the Tibetan border, at elevations ranging from 4,000 to well over 5,000 meters above sea level. Here the air holds barely 60% of the oxygen found at sea level. Temperatures drop to -15 degrees Celsius on winter nights without apology or warning. And the passes that connect these villages to the rest of Nepal, narrow, icy, wind-battered corridors cut through mountain walls, become completely impassable for months at a time, sealing the community inside its own ancient world as reliably as a bolted door. The valley itself stretches through a geography of extraordinary violence and beauty. A compressed world where the landscape shifts without warning from deep forested gorges of Himalayan birch and juniper to vast, open, high-altitude deserts of bare rock and wind-carved stone. Glacial rivers tear through narrow canyon floors with a cold, insistent fury. Above them, Peaks rise to over 7,000 meters: Kangaroo, Pisang Peak, and the jagged giants of the Annapurna Massif, standing on every horizon like a permanent, overwhelming reminder of exactly how small a human being really is. The villages of Na and Phu nestle in the upper reaches of this valley, Phu at 4,080 meters, Na at approximately 4,200. Their stone houses clustered tightly together as if drawing warmth from each other's walls. Together, their permanent population barely reaches 500 people. 500 people maintaining a civilization, keeping a language alive, keeping a faith burning, keeping a way of life intact that the rest of the Himalayas has largely abandoned. Not through stubbornness, not through ignorance of what lies beyond these mountains, but through a quiet, fierce, unshakable love for exactly who and what and where they are. That love is the real geography of Na Phu Valley, and it is more vast than any map can measure. To understand the people of Na Phu Valley, you must first understand where they came from, because their history is not simply a record of dates and events. It is the story of a people who chose one of the most demanding places on earth to call home, and then refused, across 1,000 years of hardship, to ever leave it. The original inhabitants of this valley are believed to have arrived from Tibet's ancient Janjung kingdom as far back as the 8th century, eventually settling and building their communities in these high Himalayan folds. They were Tibetan herders and traders, people already accustomed to altitude, to cold, and to the particular kind of resilience that mountain life demands. They did not stumble upon this valley by accident. They chose it deliberately, strategically, and with the careful eye of people who understood exactly what they needed from a landscape. The inhabitants of Phu once placed extraordinarily high value on their remote and strategic location. Tall stone lookout towers, now standing in ruins, were used to spot possible invaders coming from all directions, and thick wooden doors were bolted shut at night, locking the residents securely inside. This was not a community living in fear. This was a community that had built its own fortress out of geography and stone, protecting its people, its culture, and its way of life with extraordinary ingenuity. Over the centuries, these communities converted from the ancient Bon religion to Tibetan Buddhism, a faith that did not simply replace what came before, but absorbed it, creating a spiritual practice as layered and complex as the mountains surrounding it. Monasteries were built, prayer flags were raised, monks retreated into ancient caves to meditate in silences so complete they could hear their own heartbeat. The region was first discovered by the outside world only in the 1950s, by explorer Tillman while walking the highlands of Tibet, and even then the world largely looked away. It was only in 2002 that this region was opened to foreign visitors, and it only became truly accessible when locals started offering homestay accommodation in 2010. For 1,000 years before that, Na and Phu belonged entirely and exclusively to their own people, and in many ways, they still do. Tucked away above 4,000 meters in the far northeastern corner of Nepal's Manan district, the Na Phu Valley sits close to the Tibetan border, a rain-shadowed world hidden deep within the folds of the Annapurna region. It is a landscape of extraordinary contrasts, a place where the geography itself seems to be in constant conversation with the people who live within it. The geographical variation of the area ranges from a mere 1,500 meters all the way to over 8,000 meters, meaning that within a single valley system, you can move from lush subtropical forest to barren high-altitude desert in the space of a single day's walk. Few places on Earth offer such a dramatic compression of landscape within such a small area. The early days of the trekking route wind through forests of Himalayan birch and juniper. As you climb, the greenery fades into dry, high-altitude desert, where trails zigzag across rocky paths, narrow ridges, and alpine meadows scattered with dwarf rhododendrons, edelweiss, and the striking blue poppy in summer. Phu Village sits at 4,080 meters, a medieval walled settlement that feels genuinely frozen in time. Na Village, situated at approximately 4,200 meters, is perched above a large flat plain that serves as the community's agricultural heartland. Fields that the entire village works together to plow and plant each season. The area is also home to remarkable wildlife. Snow leopards, Himalayan taurs, and blue sheep roam these high-altitude landscapes alongside an extraordinary diversity of bird species. Na Village itself is locally called Chuprong, meaning the place of blue sheep, a name that speaks to how deeply the natural world is embedded into the very identity of this community. The geography of Na Phu is not simply a backdrop. It is a living, breathing force that has shaped every aspect of its people's character, culture, and daily existence for over 1,000 years. The journey to Na Phu Valley begins with a scenic but demanding drive from Kathmandu to Besi Sahar via the Prithvi Highway, a route that takes approximately 9 to 10 hours, followed by a bumpy shared jeep ride to the village of Koto, the official starting point of the trek. By the time you step out of that jeep and look around, you already know this is not going to be an ordinary journey. From Koto, the route passes through remote villages, including Meta, Phu Village, and Na Village, before climbing to the challenging Kangla Pass at 5,320 meters. This is not a trail for casual walkers. The paths are narrow, steep, and unforgiving, carved into cliff faces, crossing glacial rivers on makeshift bridges, and rising through thin air that leaves even experienced trekkers breathless and humbled. Although the entrance to the valley may seem narrow and heavily forested at first, the trail gradually opens up to reveal breathtaking views of Kanguru, Pisang Peak, and the surrounding Himalayan giants. What makes this track truly extraordinary, however, is not the difficulty. It is the fact that the people of Na and Phu have been walking these same paths their entire lives. In worn sandals, carrying heavy loads on their backs, in all weathers, without complaint. The track that challenges the world's most experienced trekkers is simply, for them, the road home. In Na Phu Valley, survival is not a topic discussed in motivational speeches or self-help books. It is not a hashtag or a weekend challenge. It is simply Tuesday. It is simply life. It is what these people have been doing, quietly, collectively, and with extraordinary competence for over 1,000 years. The annual agricultural yield in these villages often suffices for only a few months of the year, with most grain and staples needing to be imported from neighboring valleys such as Nyeshyang, Gyasumdo, and Lamjong. This means that every harvest is counted. Every grain of barley is precious. Every jar of preserved food stored before winter arrives represents hours of careful, back-breaking labor that stands between a family and hunger. Local life revolves entirely around the seasons and the demands of the harsh alpine environment. Villagers rise early to tend their terraced barley fields, herd yaks across the meadows, and spin wool into yarn for weaving thick garments. And when the warmer months arrive and the passes become passable, they descend to trade, carrying wool, yak products, and medicinal herbs to exchange for the grains and essentials their valley cannot produce alone. Life in Na and Phu is undeniably harsh by city standards. But with very little, these people have formed a mastery of survival that puts the modern world's idea of resourcefulness completely to shame. They do not survive despite their environment. They survive through it, reading it, respecting it, and working with it in a partnership that has remained unbroken for centuries. If you want to understand what real cold feels like, not the cold of an air-conditioned room, not the cold of a winter morning before the heating kicks in, come to Na Phu Valley in December. Then you will know. Winter in Phu Village is harsh and brutally cold. Daytime temperatures regularly range between -5 and 5 degrees Celsius, and nighttime temperatures can plunge well below -15 degrees Celsius. Snowfall is heavy and common, and the high mountain passes that connect these villages to the outside world can become completely blocked. The high altitude and dry landscape make the weather persistently windy, with dry air constantly flowing across the valley, making it difficult to breathe and leaving skin cracked and raw. This is not a gentle, photogenic snowfall. This is a siege, a full, unrelenting assault of wind, ice, and darkness that descends on the valley and does not lift for months. Night temperatures lower than -10 degrees Celsius are common at Phu, Na, and the surrounding high passes, and weather can turn genuinely dangerous without any warning whatsoever. A clear blue sky at noon can become a blinding snowstorm by late afternoon. The mountain makes no announcements, it gives no apologies. And yet, every winter, without fail, the people of Na and Phu weather it. They seal their thick wooden doors, they gather around their fires, they tell their stories, and they wait, with a patience that feels almost supernatural, for spring to find them again. The hardships of Na Phu Valley do not belong to winter alone, but winter is undoubtedly when the valley shows its most unforgiving face. When the season turns, families descend to lower altitudes to escape the most brutal conditions, selling their woolen goods, stored vegetables, dried fruits, and medicinal herbs as they go. A seasonal migration that is less a lifestyle choice and more a carefully calculated act of collective survival. Survival in these harsh conditions has always taken precedence over everything else, including the preservation of heritage and historical sites. A painful but deeply honest reflection of just how demanding life here truly is. Children who need schooling beyond what the village can offer must make the long and dangerous journey out. Young people who need medical care must wait. The inhabitants of Na and Phu are traditionally nomadic, and while some villagers have given up that lifestyle, many still follow this old way of life. During a trek through the valley, you can encounter nomadic camps and shelters, with herds of sheep and yaks, and some nomads who still reside in tents woven entirely out of yak hair. Not as a performance, not as a demonstration, but on Tuesday, as simply the way things are done. In Phu Village, you can observe artisans spinning yak wool or grinding mustard seeds by hand, while in Na Village, the community maintains a lifestyle that blends Tibetan Buddhism with ancient Bon practices that predate Buddhism itself by centuries. The hands doing this work are the same hands that pray at the monastery each morning, that plow the barley fields each spring, and that rock children to sleep each night, to the sound of wind against ancient stone walls. For centuries, Phu Village was connected to Tibet through trade, serving as a vital stop on ancient salt trading routes between the Tibetan Plateau and Lower Nepal. The merchants who walked those routes are gone, but their descendants still carry that same spirit of purposeful movement, of knowing exactly where they are going and why. Seasonal migration shapes the very rhythm of existence in these villages. Families moving to lower altitudes in winter, tending livestock and sustaining trade networks that stretch across the entire Annapurna region. A choreography of survival so perfectly tuned by centuries of practice that it unfolds each year like a piece of music everyone in the community knows by heart. This is not the ancient lifestyle of a museum exhibit. This is the ancient lifestyle of living, breathing, laughing human beings who simply never saw a reason to change what has always worked. In the villages of Na and Phu, stone houses with flat-roofed courtyards cluster tightly around streams and cultivated fields, while Buddhist monasteries of the Nying Mapa sect anchor both the spiritual and social life of the community. These are not houses designed by architects or built by contractors. They are built by the people themselves, by the same hands that farm the land and herd the yaks, using the stone and earth of the very mountains surrounding them. Phu Village, with its traditional stone houses stacked one above the other, seems genuinely suspended in time. Located under the shadows of barren cliffs and lofty mountains, it carries an old-world charm and rustic ambience that no modern construction could ever replicate. The houses rise in tight, interconnected clusters, sharing walls, sharing warmth, sharing the weight of the mountain winter together. Every home tells a story in its construction. Thick walls built to trap heat through months of brutal cold. Flat roofs used to dry barley, store firewood, and gather the community on warm summer evenings. Small windows that let in just enough light without surrendering too much warmth to the freezing air outside. Homes are simple, often built entirely from stone, reflecting a philosophy of taking only what the mountain offers and building something lasting from it. There is no excess here, no decoration for decoration's sake. Every element of these homes serves a purpose, and that purposefulness gives them a beauty that no luxury property could ever achieve. The culture of Na and Phu is deeply rooted in Tibetan Buddhism, especially the Nyingma and Kagyu traditions, preserved in extraordinary detail by centuries of isolation from the outside world. But culture here is not something displayed in a museum or performed for visitors. It is woven into every single moment of daily life, in the way people greet each other, in the food they prepare, in the songs they sing, and in the festivals that punctuate the mountain year with color, music, and collective joy. The cultural heartbeat of Na and Phu shines brightest during their festivals. Losar, the Tibetan New Year, is the most eagerly anticipated celebration of the year. During this time, villagers dress in their finest hand-woven garments, offer prayers, and fill the mountain air with music, masked dances, fire rituals, and feasts that bring the entire community together in a way that modern urban life has almost entirely forgotten how to do. The people of Na Phu Valley follow Tibetan Buddhism, and at every corner of the valley, symbols of faith surround you. Prayer flags flutter in the mountain wind, mani walls carved with sacred mantras line the trails, and ancient monasteries stand as the beating spiritual heart of every community. Here, faith is not a Sunday practice, it is the air itself. Here is a question worth sitting with long after this video ends. In a world racing at full speed toward more technology, more convenience, more connection, more everything, what happens to the places and the people who chose generations ago to want less? Not because they could not have more, but because they understood something fundamental about what a good human life actually requires. The people of Na Phu Valley are standing at a crossroads that no mountain pass or ancient trail can navigate for them. Young people are leaving for cities, carrying their talents, their energy, and their futures toward Kathmandu and beyond, drawn by the promise of better education, better healthcare, and better economic opportunity. And who can blame them? Who has the right to tell a young person from Na or Phu that they must remain in hardship simply to preserve someone else's idea of cultural authenticity? The tragedy is not that change is coming to Na Phu Valley. Change has always come, in the form of invaders, of seasons, of shifting trade routes. The tragedy would be if the world never paused long enough to truly see what is here before it disappears. Before the prayer flags fade, before the last elder who knows the old songs closes his eyes for the final time, before the extraordinary, irreplaceable, achingly human story of these people is reduced to a footnote in a trekking guidebook. They deserve better than a footnote. They deserve exactly what we are doing today. They deserve to be seen. Every journey worth taking changes you in a way you did not anticipate. You set out to see a valley, and you come back having seen a mirror. Because that is what places like Na Phu do to you. They hold up a reflection of everything the modern world has gained and everything it has quietly, carelessly, irreversibly lost along the way. We came to this valley as outsiders, as observers, as people with cameras and schedules and return flights booked. And we leave as something slightly different, as people who have been reminded, quietly but powerfully, that the most extraordinary things on this earth are rarely the tallest mountains or the most dramatic landscapes. They are the people living in their shadow. And in Na Phu Valley, those people are unforgettable. If this story moved something in you, share it, because stories like this one survive only when people care enough to pass them on. Subscribe for more untold human stories from the world's most extraordinary places. And tell us in the comments, what part of Na Phu Valley touched you most deeply?